Hello and welcome to the Global Electronics Report. It's Thursday, April 13th, and my name is David Burtford. Today's programme is sponsored by Twin International. According to MarketWatch, Foxconn Technology Group has told Toshiba that it is prepared to pay $27 billion for Toshiba's computer chip business. Foxconn, who are the world's largest electronics contract manufacturer, was able to take control of Sharp last year with the similar strategy of offering far beyond what others would be prepared to pay. The SEC Commission in the United States has suspended reporting on conflict minerals as part of a package of measures to ease the burden on US manufacturers. Trevor Galbraith has more on this story.
Acting US Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Mike Piwar said in an April 7th statement that the SEC is suspending enforcement of the costliest requirements of its conflict minerals rule. The statement came following an April 3rd US District Court decision remanding the rule back to the SEC to address First Amendment violations. Until these issues are resolved, it is difficult to conceive of a circumstance that would counsel in favour of enforcing Item 1.01c of Form SD, said POR, referencing the cost of conducting due diligence inquiries, citing several sources, including a March 16th letter from IPC. The author of the letter, Fern Abrams, IPC's Director of Regulatory Affairs, joins us today. Welcome, Fern.
Thank you, Trevor.
Okay, so this ruling highlights a number of areas of concern. The court claims the onerous nature of the reporting restrictions infringes American companies' First Amendment rights. Is this a fundamental difference between US and EU legislation?
Indeed it is, Trevor. The EU legislation does not require companies to state whether they are conflict-free or that their products contain conflict minerals, which is the part that the court found to be a violation.
Right. It seems that the U.S. legislation is more at a federal level and much more punitive enforcement. Would you agree with that?
Not really. The legislation that was just finalized in Europe is an EU-wide legislation, so that is at each of the EU member countries. I guess that's a supranational level, if you will, and it's enforced by each of the EU member countries, so that would be federal.
Yeah, that's true, but I mean, the thing, yeah, but the EU member countries, some of them are pretty lax about how they enforce some of that legislation, and it doesn't seem to be quite as punitive as it is over here.
Well, just to be clear, their legislation, which was just finalized through approval by the EU Parliament and Council this spring, doesn't go into effect until 2021. So I don't think we can assess their enforcement of this legislation. Certainly we can look at other legislation.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, I'm referring to obviously the way that they've enforced RoHS and other types of legislation. So, yeah. So will this decision give US suppliers and manufacturers a financial benefit not to have to undertake this reporting and monitor the supply chain?
That's certainly the intention of the acting chairman's action, since he cited the cost. It's not entirely clear to me, or probably to member companies yet, if that's going to be the case. I think perhaps outside the electronics industry, there will certainly be the anticipated financial burden relief. But talking to many of our member companies, the way they've set up their processes, it may not be possible for them to undertake the requirements that the SEC hasn't suspended without going through with the due diligence. It still stands to be seen if they can reorganize what they're doing. Another thing to consider for the electronics industry, just yesterday, Apple and Intel issued public statements reaffirming their support for due diligence and conflict-free, stating, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they were concerned about conflict minerals before Dodd-Frank, and they will continue to be regardless of the fate of Dodd-Frank. So with large companies like this in the electronics industry continuing their actions, that's certain to roll down through the supply chain as well.
Right. Yeah. I suppose if you're operating globally and selling into Europe, of course, then you're still going to be looking to abide by the legislation. There was some discussion as to whether conflict mineral legislation actually protects or harms those miners working in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Companies simply source their minerals in other countries, thereby avoiding the legislation. So does this not deny the jobs to the DRC miners?
That's a really good question, Trevor, and that issue has been under debate really since the implementation of the Dodd-Frank rules. Many cite, as do we, an apparent de facto embargo that was created by the way the legislation was crafted, where it was cheaper and easier for companies to comply simply by sourcing outside the region. Now, since that time, some companies, again citing Apple as well as Chemet and Intel, have set up controlled supply chains through the DRC where they can supervise every aspect of the mining in order to reinvest in the region and counter that effect. So, you know, it's really still up to debate. The last thing I'll add is that just last week, as you're probably aware, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health, held a hearing to ask, among other things, just your question: what has been the effect of Dodd-Frank on the ground? And the results, quite frankly, are mixed. There have been benefits, particularly in cleaning up corruption and human rights abuses in the tin, tantalum, and tungsten supply chain, but there has been a loss of revenue, and there is continuing violence associated with the gold supply chain, as well as other sources of revenue for the those perpetrating the human rights abuses. So not clear at all that those abuses have been reduced, although there does seem to be indication they've been reduced in tin, tantalum, and tungsten mines.
Yeah, I see. No, you mentioned earlier that Chemet has been one of the companies that have set up their own version to deal directly with the mines in DRC, and we highlighted that in Global SMT last year, and they've done a superb job out there. They really have. My final question, Fernand, is that the Trump administration has vowed to reduce the amount of red tape affecting US manufacturers. For the EMS industry, this is probably a first step. Are there any other pending areas of legislation likely to be affected?
Well, just to be clear, the administration has the power to go after regulations. Changing legislation is the purview of Congress. But that's an important distinction, because the administration's hands, to some extent, are tied by legislation. They have, whatever they do has to be within the laws that they're authorized to implement. That said, there's an enormous body of regulation that grows substantially every year. And we applaud the administration's intent to look closely at that in every agency for reductions of burden, especially where you have inefficient legislation. We have, in response to some of the executive orders and inquiries that the administration has set up, we have already responded to a Department of Commerce inquiry. We're in the process. I'll be testifying on April 25th at an EPA Small Business Administration hearing set up to look at ways EPA can reduce the burden, particularly on small businesses. Yeah. So we are very actively involved in that process and advocating for our members. And if I can steal 30 seconds of your time for a little self-promotion, we want to encourage executives to register and attend, if they're IPC members, IPC Impact Washington on May 2nd and 3rd. We have arranged a number of meetings with high-level officials in several agencies who are charged with implementing these executive orders on burden reduction in their agencies. And while I think I'm great, and I think our staff here in Washington is great, there's no more effective advocate for a company than its chief executive, the man or woman who runs the company and can speak to the effect of the regulations on their ability to provide jobs in their community.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is obviously a very And there's a lot going on in Washington at the moment, so this has been a very important year for people to take part in your Capitol Hill Day.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah. So I notice you're doing the same thing, with your new office over in Brussels, in Europe. Are you starting to have to interact more with the European Union over there?
We've been interacting with the European Union for over a decade on behalf of our members, particularly with some issues like ROHS, which have affected our global membership. But absolutely, last year, I should say, in 2016, we opened an office in Europe to increase and amplify that effect, and we are doing just that.
Great. Well, Fern, it's always great to talk to you, and thank you for giving us the update on the recent conflict minerals agreement. So we look forward to catching up with you sometime in May, perhaps.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Western Electronics LLC has been acquired by mid to high mix electronics contract manufacturer Computrol. Western Electronics' Meridian, Idaho facility will be merged with Computrol's local factory, and their Denver, Colorado facility will now operate under the Computrol name. The acquisition will result in Computrol being able to enhance their offering of cable and wire harnesses, which Western Electronics has been providing for the last 30 years. Leading equipment and suppliers in electronics manufacturing assembled in Munich to agree a non-proprietary Hermes standard for vendor-independent machine-to-machine communication in SMT assembly. The TCP, IP and XML-based protocol makes it possible for the first time to transport circuit boards with full traceability, with no loss of data. The standard is meant to provide greater transparency and save time and money when building SMT assembly lines. The initiative was proposed by ASM Assembly Systems and ASYS to replace the obsolete SMEMA standard with a new communication interface, and was welcomed by most leading SMT equipment manufacturers. Trevor Galbraith spoke with ASM's Director of Product Management Placement Systems, Thomas Bleem, to find out more on the Hermes standard.
So, joining us this morning is Thomas Bleem from ASM Assembly Systems, who's here to talk about the new Hermes software project. Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning, Trevor. Hope you're fine.
Great. Yes, I am. So it's pretty exciting news, this, but maybe you can tell me, my first question has to be, we've got some existing software already out there with the Mentor Graphics OML. We've got the new standard coming through, the CFX standard from IPC. Why do we need Hermes, or how does that fit into the equation?
It's actually a very good picture how this fits all together in a big picture. Basically, the Hermes standard is taking care of communications between machines, equipment only. So MES involvement is not needed at this level. If you compare this with IPC, what IPC has done in the past, basically they try to standardize the connection from machine to host systems, such as ChemX. Similar approach for Mentor with Siemens doing OML. It's also always machine to host system connection. And the opposite side, Hermes takes care of the board flow management, building the foundation of any Industry 4.0 solution. And the product itself will drive the process and the handling process over the complete line. This simplifies a lot.
I see. So I understand that the way that Hermes works is it carries packets of information with the board and passes it on to the next machines on the line. Is that correct?
This is a very good description. Hermes takes care of the control. It supports the board flow and board synchronization much better than SMEMA can do, because SMEMA has some disadvantages here. But together with the board itself, also a data package travels along the line and gets enriched over the line. So the more data is available, the more is in this data package, and information such as WIS or also unique board identifier or product type information is traveling, and then you can automatically adjust certain things, like conveying speeds, like width adjustment, and also product download of a recipe can be done in the future. This is the idea of what it's all about.
Wow, that's interesting. So you can control the belt speed and really control the flow of the job. That's really good. Yeah. So when can we expect to see the first iteration of this software? When will it be available?
Yeah, we had a very cool kickoff meeting 2 weeks ago with 17 companies. At the beginning, we came into the room. Nobody knew what happens now. A lot of competition there also. But in the end, we became partners, and we all agreed that we will start with the Hermes Standard 1.0. Now we are all implementing, and at Productronica we will go live, showing to our common customer base what we can do together as an industry. Excellent, so on Productronica we will have a big event.
Great. So I believe you had about 17 companies involved in the consortia at the moment. Are you going to widen this? Are you going to allow other companies to participate?
Yeah, this is basically the idea. This is what's happening in the background right now. A lot of interest after these press releases now. A lot of companies are starting to discuss with us. Hermes Standard shall be open for everyone to join. You attend the meeting, you become a partner, equal partner, and then you can also influence what is going to happen. And it's cool. It's Excellent. Becoming somehow viral now.
Excellent, excellent. So the official kickoff is going to be at Productronica, but of course next month we've got the SMT hybrid packaging event in Nuremberg. So I'm hoping that we can all have a sit down with some of the partners and really go into some detail on how Hermes works.
This would be very cool to meet you again, and we will also discuss with more companies to join and become a big group of partners.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Thomas, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for the meeting.
Join me after a quick break for more news on technology releases and the latest on the changes to contract manufacturing's top 50 lineup. Manufacturing Market Insider has released its annual MMI Top 50 list of EMS, or Electronics Manufacturing Services, providers that surpass $270 billion US. Top-tier companies like Foxconn and Pegatron performed poorly, and that caused a 1% drop in the overall sales. The other 48 companies, however, had positive growth of 1.5% in 2016. The top 10 in descending order are Honhai, Pegatron, Flex, Jabil, Sanmina, Celestica, Wistron, New Kimbo Group, Plexus and Benchmark Electronics. A new soldering station by Shenzhen Aten Technology has been released. A 60-watt ESD-safe soldering station with high-performance dual-wire heater which is compatible with 900M series soldering tips. Features include temperature locking, beep alarm function, temperature readout and MCU controlled temperature calibration, simulation bar indicating heating up status, separate iron stand to save room and to make easier deposit, buttons for presetting or switching frequently used temperatures. This month Trackwise has delivered its largest ever printed circuit board for an aerospace customer. The flexible through-hole plated power harness is an impressive 25 meters long. Managing Director of Trackwise, Philip Johnston, said that it was a fantastic achievement by the team and a clear endorsement from their aerospace customer as to the potential of large format printed circuit technology as a lightweight alternative to traditional cable harnesses. We'll be back at our usual time next Friday, but until then, have a great Easter. Thank you to our sponsors, Twin International, bubble-free potting from the industry leader in benchtop to fully inline potting under vacuum. Check back next week for more top stories from around the electronics world.